All right, I think it would be 3:31, so let's go ahead and get started. Before I open up with a word of prayer, I just want to introduce ourselves very quickly. I'm Tyler, and this is Brady, and we are the Bible Academy. So we are a sector of Foundations for Faith here at Fall Creek. So all that is Bible-based education, and we are just one of that. We're going to be looking at the Torah over the next 5 weeks. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up in a word of prayer, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this opportunity for us to gather together at a time that it's kind of hard to gather together and just study your word and dive into this beautiful storyline that you have presented us. We're going to look at the first 5 books over the course of the next year. These first 5 weeks are just your opening scene. So I ask that you guide us in truth. I ask that you speak through Brady and I and every single person here to foster that conversation. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Mm-hmm. All right. First off, does everybody have one of these? A Bible? Yes? No? If not, we have a stack over there of just Bibles that you can just go grab. But yeah, I wanted to start with this as you guys, everybody get their Bible out because we're going to be in there. What is this? Or better yet, what do you think of this when someone says the Bible? What's that? God's Word. Okay. So God's Word. I'm going to write a couple of these down. God's Word. Anything else come to mind? Okay, an instruction manual. Okay. So an instruction manual meaning like your life or like how to conduct your life, a manual on how to go about day to day. That's a common answer that you'd see amongst many people in the church. Anybody else? A love letter? Okay. What do you think of it?
Probably a group of stories.
A group of stories? Okay, what do you mean by that?
I mean, you've got several books in there, and then you've got several stories within those books, so just telling different stories about God's people.
Okay. I'll admit this isn't something I try to read every day, but it's not something I read every day because it's kind of hard. Is it easy to read, hard to read? What do you guys think? Sometimes hard. Okay. Sometimes hard. Any other thoughts about it?
It's not always relatable.
It's not relatable. Boom. So not relatable, or I'll just write outdated. Makes more sense to me. And what do you mean by that when you say like not relatable?
It's hard to read into the scriptures, especially the Old Testament, and pull out knowledge and apply it to what's not in there.
Right, because this is like how many thousands of years ago?
It's not always practical.
Right, yeah, exactly. So these stories, they're like, concerned about things that you and I aren't really concerned about. And we're supposed to read this story and then somehow apply it to like the 21st century. Right. Any other thoughts about the Bible? Yeah.
It's easier for me to read it if I'm listening to it while I'm reading it.
Okay, so it's easier for you to listen to it than it is to actually like sit down and physically like read it? Okay.
But I read it as I'm listening.
Okay.
So it makes it easier.
Yeah.
For some reason.
I get you. Okay, so knowing all of this, or at least our thoughts about it, it's God's Word. Some view it as an instruction manual, a love letter. There's stories in there. It can be hard, a little outdated, and sometimes we like to listen to it. How should we be reading this? Depends on what you want to learn. Okay, so let's say I wanted to find out a lot about the theory of relativity. What type of literature or what type of book would I consult? A science book, right? Let's say I want to know a lot about algebra. What would I go to? Yeah, we go to a math textbook. Let's say I want to be entertained. So I want to sit down, and over the next week, I'm on vacation in Florida. and I want to be entertained, what would I read? What's that? I'm looking for genre.
Does Twitter count as a genre?
Yeah, I would just read Twitter. Yeah, you'd read a story, like a novel, or most people would. I guess it kind of depends person to person on that. But you would read a story or a book from that end. So there's different types of books, okay? And I say all this right off the cuff because the way you think about the Bible and the way you think about what we're going to read here drastically changes the way you approach it. If this is a science textbook, I'm going to approach it like I'm reading a science textbook, getting ready for my biology exam. If this is a story, well, I read those stories way different than I would a science textbook, correct? Okay? You don't sit down with a textbook and just read it while you're sitting out on a lounge chair just for fun. Well, I guess you could, but that might be a little weird. But yeah, so what we believe that the Bible is one unified story. It's a collection of 66 books compiled by 40-some authors, okay, over the span of a couple thousand years. And we believe that the Bible is one unified story that points to Jesus Christ. So what we're going to do is we're going to dissect that story, and very specifically the opening scenes. The opening scenes of the Bible is Genesis 1 through 11, okay? So that's what we're here to do. Like I said, we're a sector of the Foundations for Faith class here at Fall Creek. It's trying to get people into the Bible. This is our first one that we have done of this nature. We have led a young adult course, for the last
About year and a half
or so. So I just wanted to quickly, I would love to go around the room and get to know every single face, in names. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to quickly introduce Brady, and then Brady's going to introduce me. And then we're going to plunge forward with this. We're going to dive into the book, and we're going to try to frame a way to read this book and try to understand it, as you were saying, culturally. It seems outdated. It seems hard. Let's try to get into their head. Let's try to read it from this angle. So a little bit about Brady. I want to start with Brady, if you've never met him before. In May of 2016, he had just walked down the aisle and said, "I do," and decided that he was going to follow his new wife to Columbus, Ohio. She was going out to grad school there to be a physical therapist or study physical therapy. And while he was there, he's working a job at Costco. Right, Costco? Yeah. You were a forklift driver?
Yep, forklift driver at nights.
So he was driving a forklift, and they didn't really have a whole lot of friends, so they were trying to go to different churches just to meet some people. And they ended up going to a church in Worthington, correct? It's on the north side, it'd be like the Carmel of Indianapolis, except for in Columbus. And while there, he got invited to a Bible study, and it was by a Bible teacher. Not a pastor, a Bible teacher, someone that had gone to school, studied theology, and studied the scriptures. And he was not employed by the church as a pastor. He was employed at a school teaching scriptures. He, through the church, though, would teach his class. And Brady, I don't know the date of when you first went to that class, but he had told me, he called me after it, and he was like, "Dude, you're not going to believe this." I sat down thinking just another Bible study, and all of a sudden, I'm whipping out napkins out of my pocket, trying to write down different things that he said. And that really lit a fire under Brady. And our paths would merge back together as he would move back here to Indiana, and we would start a Bible study together. So that's a little bit about Brady. He's by no means a theology major. Neither of us are. He's just a guy that likes the Bible and likes to study it and has found some really cool resources. And so here we are together packaging it for you guys here.
Yeah, and so I'm going to introduce Tyler here. So Tyler's got the same sort of story. It's not the exact same, but it's the same sort of story. So about the time that I'm going to this new study with Corey, which is the Bible teacher he was talking about, Tyler is kind of going through a new phase in life. He's in grad school. He's kind of transitioning out of college, losing some friends there. And at one point, he's sitting in church, and he's like, "Okay, I understand that love God, love people, but there's got to be more here, right? There's got to be more to this. There's got to be more that we should be doing." And so Tyler, in the middle of church, which you're not supposed to do, by the way, he just opened up his Bible and just started reading. Just ignored Tom, didn't care what he said.
That's true.
just started opening up his Bible and just started at page 1 and just started reading. And that kind of started a new revelation for you, right? Just looking at the Bible in a different way. With that, he's in grad school, like I said, and he is getting a degree in digital storytelling. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And to give you an example of Tyler and his storytelling, so we put together the BibleAcademy.net, and I'm setting things up, and I'm getting a about page about me. I text Tyler and I was like, hey, can you just send me a short little about me? I'm thinking he's going to send me something that says, hey, I'm Tyler. I'm a graduate from Ball State University with a master's in digital storytelling, and I love the Bible, and something very simple like that. Let me read to you what Tyler sent me. An inherent storyteller and creative, Tyler found himself in a church service July 2018, reaching for a pew Bible. As a lifelong churchgoer and baptized believer of 13 years, he knew the basics: love God, love people, and yes, of course, John 3:16. However, he was left questioning, there had to be more to this, right? As the service drowned into white noise, he began to open page 1. A true storyteller.
Why did you read that like I have some creepy voice?
Well,
Like, seriously.
I read it, and I'm thinking, okay, this is just going to be a quick rundown of what we are, and I feel like I'm stepping into a novel or something like that. It's unbelievable. I take mine, I have to completely chuck mine out the window and start from scratch. So with that, with the storytelling and with this newfound love of the Bible, those two paths kind of merge for Tyler, where he's learning about the Bible and he's loves doing this thing about circular storytelling. And these themes come together to converge into a passion. And him and I end up joining together and be able to turn this into a teaching opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a little bit about us and who we are and what we're going to do here. So this section of this class is 5 weeks long. Those 5 weeks I'll write them out here for you guys. First week is this one. We're going to define our approach on how we're going to study this. Okay, and we'll get into the very first little bit of Genesis. Next week, we'll look at the creation story. The third week after that, we're going to look at the fall. And then the fourth week after that, fifth week down here, after the fall, we're going to look at the flood. And then we're going to look at the Tower of Babel. Likely stories that you have heard before or have heard mentioned, whether it's in Sunday school, at church camp, or in a church service over the years. But we have found ourselves, as we have been leading these young adult classes and getting involved in some different studies, that this right here, Genesis 1 through 11, is the opening scenes of the Bible. And I'm not a huge movie person, but for those of you that like to go to the movies, it really is hard to follow a movie when you walk in after the first scene and try to pick up the storyline from there. A story develops itself and develops a problem in the first opening scenes. So when you glance over those and you just jump right to the New Testament, you're missing the point of Jesus. And the point of Jesus is found in the opening scenes. So that's what this class is, okay? We're going to tailor this not only for in-person, for online stuff. There'll be more info at our website. There's social media handles, all that. So let's go ahead and just dive in to this idea that the Bible is a story, okay? The Bible is one unified story pointing to the figure of Jesus Christ. So I'm going to play a video for you guys, and on that video, it's going to dive a little bit further into this idea. What is the storyline of the Bible?
The Bible's an important book, but it's really long.
Yeah, it's a collection of many books written over a long period of time, but altogether they tell one unified story.
So, what's the story of the Bible?
Well, it begins by introducing us to a beautiful mind, the author of all reality, a being called God. And he has the power to take the dark chaos of the uncreated world and bring about order and beauty and a garden full of life.
And to crown this accomplishment, God appoints these creatures called humanity,
Or in Hebrew, Adam,
and they're made as God's image.
which means that they're commissioned to rule this beautiful world on God's behalf by harnessing all of its potential and creating even more beauty and order.
This is a story about humans using their power to do meaningful, life-giving work. But the question is, how?
Yeah, humanity now faces a choice that's represented by a fruit tree. So humans could partner with God and find freedom by trusting in his knowledge of good and evil.
Or
They could seize power and define good and evil on their own, which, God warns, will kill them.
and they hear the voice of a dark, mysterious creature that tells them the choice is simple. Take the fruit. It'll give you power and freedom to rule the world on your own terms.
And so they seize this knowledge, and as a result, they become suspicious and self-protective. It leads to fractured relationships, violent power grabs, and ultimately, a whole civilization, Babylon, that has redefined evil as good. And so, God scatters this corrupted human project.
And here the story of the Bible takes an important turn. We zoom into the story of a man and a woman who come out of Babylon, Abraham and Sarah.
Yeah, God promises that from them will come a new people, a nation that has another chance to make the right choice. And if they succeed, it will open up this new way forward for the rest of humanity.
And this is why the rest of the Bible story is about this family.
And it does not go well. Despite God's personal guidance, Abraham's family gives in to that same temptation to redefine good and evil on their own terms, apart from God.
Even when their best people were in charge, rulers who loved God's guidance and had divine wisdom, even they gave in.
And so Israel was warned by their own prophets that these choices would lead them back to Babylon, this time as conquered captives living in exile, and that's exactly what happened.
So even with God's personal guidance, Israel fails. Who can succeed?
Well, the prophet said that the story wasn't over. God's going to send a new leader to Israel to cover for their failures and to transform the people's hearts and minds so that they can make the right choice.
And so the part of the Bible called the Old Testament ends, and these promises are left hanging.
And then the biblical story continues into the New Testament. We're introduced to a man who comes from the line of Israel's kings, Jesus of Nazareth. And he said that he was bringing all these promises to their completion.
He confronted that dark, mysterious evil that all humanity has given into and resisted its power.
And then he announced that God had arrived to rule the world through himself. Jesus taught about God's definition of good and evil, and he said that real power is serving others. According to Jesus, it's people who love the poor and even love their enemies. These are the kinds of people who actually rule the world.
And that's confusing, but also really beautiful.
And so is the claim that the story goes on to make about Jesus, that he is God become human, to be for Israel and for all humanity what we could never be for ourselves. He came to take the consequences of our evil into himself, and his sacrificial love proved more powerful than evil, than even death itself.
So now humanity's presented with a new choice.
Represented by a new tree.
Stick with the old way of being human, or venture into this new way.
And in the story, those who choose the way of Jesus find themselves energized by God's own power. People who know that they are loved and forgiven by God can become people who love and forgive others in return.
The Jesus movement quickly spread throughout the world, forming these new communities of people who follow the way of Jesus.
But they faced problems. There was persecution from the outside by people in power, and inside there was confusion, even compromise.
Yeah, because following Jesus is really hard.
And so the movement's leaders, called apostles, they wrote letters to comfort and to challenge these communities to stay faithful to the difficult way of Jesus.
And they're called to hope for the day when Jesus will come and change everything.
And so the Bible ends by pointing to the future day, when all wrongs are made right, when evil is eradicated, heaven and earth are united, and humanity can rule the world together in the love and power of God.
Okay, so that's the story of the Bible, and it brings all of these books together.
But what's interesting is that each book contains a different kind of literature that contributes to the story in a unique way, and that's what the next video will begin to explore.
Okay, cool. So that was a video produced by the Bible Project. They're a crowd-funded organization out in Portland, Oregon, and they have a lot of... Oh, you're good. They just wanted to tell us again. So they're a crowd-funded organization out in Portland, Oregon. We're going to be using a lot of their content just because they
A lot of their content.
package this story together so well. So as we said, the Bible is one unified story pointing to the figure of Jesus Christ. Before we are going to break this open today and read, but before we break it open, I need to ask you, what is in a story? Because if I'm opening this and anticipating a textbook, I'm going to read that a lot different than if I'm going to open it and anticipate a story. So this might sound like high school English class, but what's in a story? Or what are the components of a story? What's that? Okay, so we have like an opening scene. Yep, we have an open or beginning. What else do we have in stories? Think of like, yeah, we have characters, absolutely. Okay. We have a plot, yeah. Plot or a storyline. Anything else? A scene or a setting, yeah. All of this goes into a story. You think of a story like The Wizard of Oz, it starts in Kansas, and then it goes to the Yellow Brick Road. Any other components of a story? Yeah. Those go under characters. You have the pro and the antagonist, yeah. Anything else?
What about themes?
Yeah, themes. Every story has a good theme. Most stories have multiple themes. Anything else? Yeah, climax. There's rising action, there's falling action, there's a resolution. The Bible has all of that. And that's the biblical authors, as they're constructing this, are constructing what you know as a story and using these different components to fit into that. Today, we're going to look at 3 of these. Just for the sake of time, we're going to look at characters and how the Bible develops characters versus how we develop characters and like what we're used to in modern stories like The Wizard of Oz and any other story that you might have watched recently. We're also going to talk a little bit today about themes, and then we're going to talk about plot and storyline and how the biblical authors use that. This is all trying to just define our approach. That's all we're doing today, trying to define an approach so that when we crack this open on page 1, like me, that random church service, what is it that I'm reading and what can I anticipate? So let's start with themes. Themes are a really, really, really important component of stories. I use The Wizard of Oz. Brady, what's the theme of The Wizard of Oz in your eye?
Well, there's kind of multiple themes, right? Like, don't judge a book by its cover, and you've got like the courage and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so you have courage, or don't judge a book by its cover. Okay, anybody else think of a theme of The Wizard of Oz?
Not everything has to be, basically what you have is what you really want.
Yeah, like you already have everything you need. Yeah, exactly. That's another theme.
Grass isn't always greener.
Yeah, exactly. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. How about friendship? Is that a theme? How about there's no place like home? Okay, how could this be? How could this be? We all have likely seen The Wizard of Oz, but we can all pull out multiple themes, okay? That's how stories work, and that's how the story of the Bible works as well. However, the way they're building themes, the way we build themes in modern stories is not the same way that the biblical authors build themes. The biblical authors are building themes off of words. Let's find one. This is what we're going to do as we start into next week and we start getting heavy into the text. We're going to identify themes. So let's turn to Genesis. Everybody got their Bible? Let's turn to Genesis, and let's start with Genesis chapter 3. Everybody knows God makes the heavens and the earth. It takes 7 days. And then he makes man, and he rests. And he's going to chill in this garden with them and walk around with them. This snake figure comes onto the scene and says to Eve, hey, take of the fruit. You will be like a god, okay? And as we know, Adam and Eve, they take of the fruit, they eat, and sin enters the world, correct? This is all a fairly familiar story, right? We get a really weird detail really weird detail in the text if you spot it. Genesis chapter 3. Let's start in verse 23. So they eat of the fruit, and now God's going to kick them out of the garden. You're out. And the biblical authors write in verse 23, so the Lord God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had been taken. After he drove the man out, he placed them on the east side of the Garden of Eden, cherubim and flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way of the tree of life. So which direction did they kick Adam and Eve out or drive them out? Yeah, east. What a weird way, what a weird detail. Like, why include that, right? I'm never going to say, hey, Brady, get out of my house and go east. Like, that's just not something I'm going to write down, right? So why is it in there? God doesn't just have it in there for some odd reason. So let's take that. Let's see if we can find it elsewhere. So after that story, after Adam and Eve are kicked out and they're moved eastward, we get the story of their descendants, and their descendants are Cain and Abel. Everybody knows Cain murders Abel. Okay, so let's flash forward. Genesis 4, verse 16. Again, this is just one theme. The Bible has themes on every single page. This is one theme, and I think it's going to start popping out to you pretty fast. Genesis 4, verse 16. I can read it here. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Okay. What happened when Adam and Eve were kicked out? They were kicked out and moved eastward. What happens when Cain murders Abel? He is sent which direction?
East.
He's sent east. Okay. Let's go forward. After that story, we get the flood. The world spirals out of control, and God's going to flood the earth. He floods the earth, and he starts over this guy named Noah. And then we humans aren't too great. We spiral out of control once again, and we reach the Tower of Babel. Okay? The Tower of Babel is like one of the ultimate locations of just where evil comes from. And sin, that's in Genesis 11. So let's move forward, Genesis 11. And let's see which direction or what detail we get here. Genesis 11, verses 1 and 2. So man's going to gather together to commit this really big community sin. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. So which direction are they moving to? They're moving east. Let's do one more just to prove a point here. Right after that, right after the Tower of Babel, we get the call of Abraham. And it's like, hey, we're going to start over. We're going to make the nation of Israel. And Abraham has this guy that's closely associated with him. You've probably heard of him, called Lot. Okay? Lot's a relative. And Lot ends up settling in Sodom and Gomorrah. Everybody, I assume, knows that Sodom and Gomorrah isn't the greatest of places. Okay? So what direction does he move to move to Sodom and Gomorrah? Genesis 13, verse 11. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. Okay, again, we get this detail. I don't know about you, but I don't really tell stories, and I'm like, hey, Brady, get out of my house, go to the east, and head to Newcastle. That's what the biblical authors do. They take one word, and they'll use it in multiple stories. And every single time you hear that word, you're supposed to recall all of those stories that had used it once before. So when you're reading it about Lot, it's saying, hey, remember Adam and Eve? Remember Cain and Abel? Remember the Tower of Babel? All of that, it's all building on top of each other. So the word eastward in the Bible, you and I just mean, when we say east, we mean like go to Newcastle. For them, that means leaving the presence of God. When you and I pick up the Bible, we don't get that. If I'm going to start on page 1 and just start reading and I hear, oh, they're kicked out eastward, I'm not thinking, oh, they moved eastward. That means they're moving away from the presence of God. But these people at this time, that's what that means for them. Does that make sense to everybody?
So basically, we're taking this theme, and because the people in these stories, when they're moving eastward, are causing sin or committing sin, we're associating moving east with moving out of the presence of God.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like when we get to in 1 Samuel, you get a story of David abdicating the throne, right?
Yeah.
He's runs away, and then you just get this weird detail of him moving east. So we're supposed to just take that, and
Yeah.
we don't know David's doing anything wrong at this point, but because of the theme of east throughout the rest of the Bible, we're supposed to say what he's doing is wrong there.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just one, eastward. The same thing happens with words like fire, water, Egypt, Babylon. All of these have this. We're going to uncover these as we plunge through. I'm just trying to point out a couple of these for you guys. Another thing they do as far as themes, what's the number like 13 mean to you guys? Bad luck, yeah, exactly. What's the number 25 mean? Yeah, that was like Taj Teague's number at Ball State, like, whatever. Like, there's no real significance for that. At this time, and when the biblical authors are writing this, those numbers, just like the number 13 for us, have big, big, big meaning. So, like when they say 3, that means something. When they say 7, that means something. Let's see if we can find one and spot one out. Turn with me. Let's start with Noah. I erased already, but the flood. We'll be there in week 4. Genesis chapter 8. We're going to see a number here. So Genesis 8, verse 6. So this is the waters come on the land, and it's ready for Noah to go out, ready for him to go off the boat. Verse 6, after 40 days, Noah opened a window he had made in the ark and sent out a raven, and it kept flying back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. How long? 40 days. Anybody know any other places in the Bible where 40 is? 40 days and 40 nights, yeah. Any other places of 40 come to mind? Yeah, in the desert. What's going on in the desert? Yeah, the Israelites are wandering around. It's not 40 days, it's like 40 years. Yeah, exactly. Any other places? Top of you?
Temptation.
Yeah, Jesus' temptation in the wilderness, absolutely. So, what the biblical authors are doing, 40 means testing someone's faithfulness. Well, again, we'll uncover these as we go. I'm just trying to give you this is what we're going to do. This is how a Jew would have read it. This is how these people would have read it back in their day. They would have came across a number like, Noah was on the boat for 40 days. Oh, got it. God was testing his faithfulness. You and I don't read it that way. We think 40 days, that's like a month and a week. So, we don't read that way. So, and then it really gets theologically interesting. Turn to 2 Corinthians. It's in your New Testament. Let's take this knowledge of 40 and let's apply it to the New Testament now. So in 2 Corinthians, let's turn to chapter 11. The guy that's writing this is Paul. Paul's the guy that takes the gospel after Jesus has walked the earth and spreads it to basically like all the world. But he gets beaten up. He gets put in prison. He suffers a lot. Here he's talking about his suffering. So in chapter 11, let's start in verse 23. He's kind of just rambling here. Are they servants of Christ? I am out of my mind to talk like this. I am more. I have worked much harder, been in prison more frequently, been flogged more severely, and been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. If I'm just reading that, I read 40 lashes minus 1. What do you think? 39. Yeah, why not just say 39? Why write 40 lashes minus 1? So what's being communicated here? If 40 means testing one's faithfulness, what is Paul trying to communicate there?
He's trying to say that he saw that as his faith being tested, right?
Yeah. So they were trying to test his faith, but he didn't break. Not quite there, minus 1. They might have actually whipped him 39 times. There might have been something legalistically like you can only beat someone 39 times. But what's theologically being communicated there is supposed to draw you back to Genesis. It's supposed to draw you back to the Israelites wandering. It's all compounding on each other like this. We don't read the Bible like this, do we? Like, that's just not something we do. We don't pick it up and read and like, oh, wow, number 10, that means completeness. Like we don't do that. We just think 10, and we move on. So that's how the biblical authors use themes. Very different than how we use themes, right? Very different than the Wizard of Oz, like how they develop themes. They're developing it through courage and hope. The biblical authors are developing themes through words. Very, very different, right? So we as modern readers, we kind of miss that. So that's themes. Let's talk about character. The way we develop characters is way different in modern English or in modern stories than how the biblical authors did it. How do we in today's day and age develop characters? Think about them. Brady, what's the most, you were watching a movie the other night. What?
Tenet.
Tenet? Was it good?
It was really weird.
Weird?
It was hard to understand.
Okay, hard to understand. So how were they developing characters in that movie?
They introduced them in different scenarios to give us more and more background as the story went.
Okay, so you're getting detail about them?
Lots of detail.
Lots of detail. Okay. What other let's think of another story. I don't think a lot of people have seen Tenet.
Star Wars.
I have never seen Star Wars.
Classic Star Wars.
I've never seen Star Wars. Find something that I know.
All right, this would be easier if we find a movie that you have seen.
Okay, yeah.
Because you don't watch movies.
Yeah.
Like at all.
Let's do Hoosiers.
All right.
Everybody seen the movie Hoosiers? Okay, the basketball story, okay? About Indiana, small town, Milan, beats the big school. Okay, how are they developing characters? Let's think of Norman Dale, the head coach. How are they developing that character? What are they showing you? What are they telling you? Do we get his physical description? Yeah, we see him. Do we get his emotional description? Yeah, absolutely. He has a scene in there where he breaks down and everything. And he's like a hard-hitting coach. Do we see how he interacts with other people? Yeah, we're getting lots and lots and lots and lots of details in modern stories. They always say that with a story, the details are the story is in the details. So develop a good character, write lots of details about them. Describe their height, describe how they look, describe this, describe that. The biblical authors, they're like, nah, we're not doing that. We don't develop characters that way. They do it in a very, very different way. You rarely in the Bible hear how someone looks. Rarely. It's very, very rare. But when you do, that detail matters significantly. Let's find one. Judges. It's in your Old Testament. This is where we're at with our young adults right now. We're 8 books in, so this one was fresh in my mind when I was preparing. Judges chapter 2. Again, all of this is just to get you guys thinking that when you're reading this, perhaps there's something more. Perhaps there's something I'm missing. Maybe there's a reason it's unrelatable. Maybe there's a reason it's outdated, because we don't think like these people. So in Judges chapter 2, turn to verse 15. We meet a guy named, I'm going to mispronounce this, Ehud. He's a judge over Israel for some time. Don't think a judge like Judge Judy. Think of a judge like, hits the gavel. Think of a judge like a military leader and can kind of act as like a liaison between God and the people. Think more like George Washington, almost like when he's crossing the Delaware. That's the Judges. So in Judges chapter 2.
I think it's chapter 3, verse 15.
Oh, chapter 3, verse 15.
Yeah.
Thank you. So in Judges chapter 3, verse 15, we get in this cycle of the Israelites. They commit sin, then they cry out to the Lord. The Lord raises this deliverer for them. This is Ehud on this story. So verse 15. Again, the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer, Ehud, a left-handed man.
Got ourselves a southpaw.
Yeah, we've got ourselves a really good baseball pitcher. Left-handed to us, what does that mean? Yeah, their right brain, they're a little funny to eat next to.
They smudge their writings when they write.
Yeah. What does left-handed mean to these people? That means they were cursed by the gods. Or, in the case of Ehud, it's drastically important to the story. What he's going to do is he's going to make his way into this leader, and he's going to kill the leader. And at the time, what you would do is you would smuggle like a sword in, like right here, and then you would pull the sword and kill the guy. So when most people are right-handed, so when you come to the guard, they're checking under your left thigh. This guy's left-handed, he hides the sword under his right thigh. And so what he does is he goes up there, gets checked. Guards don't check this. He makes it in with the sword, grabs sword, plunges it in. So knowing that he's left-handed is crucial to this story. That's why they pop that in there. But usually we don't get that. We don't really hear how like Abraham looks. We hear how his wife looks. She's beautiful, and we get told that she's barren, but that's the only detail that we get. They're building characters in a very, very different way. Everybody on board with that? Does that make sense? Again, we're just trying to today define an approach.
So you're saying we're supposed to just keep our eye out for some of these weird things. Most of the characters aren't getting a lot of this big description, so when description is given, we really need to focus on what that is and why the author decided to put it in there.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. So, and then also, if you come across Ehud and you're like, why in the world would he call him a left-handed man? That's weird. Pause and think, or pause and stop. There's got to be something more there. Okay. What is the name? My name's Tyler. That's Brady. I was named after my mom's dentist's dog. I don't know why. My great-grandma could never remember that. So she could never remember my name, but she could remember that story, so she called me Spot. Brady, were you named after anyone?
No, unfortunately, I have the namesake of Tom Brady, which is not good.
I understand, yeah.
So, not great.
Yeah, so mostly, my mom just liked the sound of the name Tyler. Sometimes we name people like their middle names. I'm Tyler Michael. My dad's name is Michael. So I'm named in that sense. But we name people nowadays, right? Oh, that sounds cute, Carly. Or that's great, Ashley, something like that. The way biblical authors are naming people, their name is their character. So whatever that word means is what their character is. And we don't really get that. We don't get that in modern language. So does anybody know what the word Abraham means in Hebrew? Yeah, actually you said it, father of multitude. That's what his name means. That's his whole character, because he's going to be a father of the nation of Israel. How about Moses? Anybody know what Moses means in Hebrew? What's that?
Is it drawn from the water?
Yeah, it is, yeah. It's drawn from the water, to draw out. Usually, you and I just say Moses, we don't think about that. But the word actually means to draw out of the water, which is funny because when Moses is a baby, he's going to be drawn out of the water. That's his whole character. So when you encounter names, it's not like how we use names in modern day stories.
Yeah, and God actually changes people's names when he's trying to change their character. Like with Abraham, you've got Abram at first, and then he changes his name to Abraham to more identify what his character is supposed to be.
Yeah. And then lastly, one last thing about character before we move on to plot. Just because they're in the Bible does not mean that we should live like them. That took me forever to realize. And I don't think I really realized it until we started diving in, him and I, and having to teach this. And I think it's because the nature of Sunday school growing up. Sunday school, I would go to Sunday school, and then I would get a lesson on Daniel in the lion's den, and then it would be have courage like Daniel. Or I would hear the story of Abraham, and it's have faith like Abraham. That's a really slippery slope when we start trying to act like these characters, because almost all of these characters have a very, very significant flaw to them. There's only one that doesn't, and that's Jesus. So like Abraham, he used an Egyptian slave for sex. Jacob probably shouldn't live like that guy. He was super deceiving and lied out of his teeth to get the birthright from his brother. Probably not a good life model. David, he sleeps with another man's wife and then murders the man. Probably not something we should do. Probably shouldn't live like Daniel or live like David.
He kills Goliath at one point, and then he takes his head and wears it on his belt for 40 years. It's kind of a messed up guy.
Yeah. So, but that's what I'm saying. We're just trying to define approach. Can I define themes and can I define characters? Okay. And how are these authors building characters in this Bible so that when I stumble upon an Adam or an Eve or a Cain or an Abel, like we're going to see, what can I do with it? How can I think about this like they would think about it? And this is how they would think about it. Any questions thus far? Cool. Let's talk about plot. and structure. When I say the word plot, Brady, what comes to mind for you?
The whole storyline, the reason the story is being told.
Right, so like, and within that, I think Paula might have said this, you have like rising action, and then you have like the climax of the story, and then you have falling action, and then you have a resolution of a story, and all that. So let's say I just jump in and I jump right to the climax of the story. What am I missing?
The whole setup, why you needed the climax.
Yeah, exactly. Why you needed the character to, at this moment, like rescue everything or rescue everyone. Let's say I jump in and I jump right to the book of Revelation. That's the resolution. What am I missing in the book of Revelation if I haven't had all this?
The entire Bible.
The entire Bible before it. Yeah, exactly. It's important to understand contextually where you're at in the story. So we said this is one story. There's multiple stories labeled in there or subdivided in there, but this is one story. So we need to be able to identify, and that's what a part of this is, where we're at in the story. So we thought, okay, let's start on the first pages. Let's just get the open. Let's get the opening scene, and let's roll with this. So that's what we're going to do. Context. We're going to look at the context of the story here. Not just context in the sense of like, where am I at in the story, but also their worldview. Like, how are they thinking? Okay? So like the number 40, we're not thinking the same way they are about that number. That's their worldview. Okay? The word eastward, same thing. We're going to try to get into their context. And what's super critical to know, we've already seen this with the word eastward. When I say east, we just mean a direction, right? Well, we found out that eastward means leaving the presence of God also. So, words have changed meaning over the course of time, right? Like the word eastward to them means that, and now eastward to us just means this. So, I was actually combing through some text messages the other day, and I found a text. I'm going to put that text on the screen here in a second, but first I need some help. Can I get, Dad, can you help me? Sure. Come on up here for me. You can leave your mask on. And I need a younger person. So, Ellie, you want to come? You're younger than my... So, Ellie. Okay. We found this text message, okay, and we're going to put it up on the screen. And here's the example here. The example is words have changed meaning, not only from Bible times to this time, but between how old are you? 16 and 58. Okay? Between a 16-year-old and a 58-year-old, let's see if words have different meanings. Let's find that. Go ahead and put that text up. Okay, so this is a text message, and it says, no cap. Dad, you're going to have to translate this. No cap. Grace spilled the tea on Ben. Evidently, boy been simping for a while. What does that mean?
I think somebody's drinking alcohol.
So you would think that someone's drinking alcohol.
Yeah,
And what makes you say that?
because it says evidently boy been sipping for a while.
Sipping or sipping?
Simping for a while.
So how does sipping mean alcohol?
Misspell.
Oh, it's a classic typo.
Yeah.
Okay, so no cap, Grace spilled the tea on Ben. Evidently, boy been simping for a while. It's about alcohol. Okay. To a 50, how old are you?
50-something.
50-something. Okay, Ellie, you're 16. There. What's this actually mean?
Okay, do you want me to break it up?
Yeah, I mean, just walk me through. Obviously, the first one's no cap.
Okay, so cap itself is like a lie. So in this case, they put no in front of it, so it's like no lie. I'm 100% serious. And then next, spill the tea. That's like if you have drama or just gossip that you've heard.
So drama or gossip?
Yeah.
Not alcohol?
No.
I guess you could have alcohol. Alcohol has drama, but yeah.
Alcohol does.
It does.
Yeah, and then you're like with your friends, so you just tell them all about it. And then boy, that's something you say when someone is doing something dumb. So they're just saying this boy is being dumb because he's simping. That's like someone who will drop anything and everything for one person. Like they only care about this one person and nothing else.
So if I put this in like, I'm going to try to use what you said. So really, no cap, Grace spilled the tea on Ben. Evidently, boy been simping for a while. What that really means to you is, no lie, I'm telling the truth here. Grace revealed the drama about Ben, and evidently that dumb boy, well, he's been madly in love for a while.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, is that what you got?
No clue.
Not a clue. Exactly. Exactly. Thank you, guys. That's all we need.
Thanks, guys.
So,
He was close. I mean,
he was close. So that's critical to keep in mind. That's just one demonstration for us about how words have changed meaning. And that's from a 16-year-old to a 50-something-year-old. Imagine Abraham, who's thousands of years ago, to us now. Not only have we changed languages from Hebrew to English and all the stops in between, those words mean something different socially. The context is different. So we have to slow down as Bible readers. We can't read something and instantaneously think, oh, an eagle. I know what an eagle means. An eagle means freedom. An eagle means pride, like America. That's not what it means to the authors. A fig tree to us is just a fig tree. To them, that represents a nation, okay? We have to slow down with these words, and we're going to slow down with these as we read, as we get into the storyline starting next week really heavily. So not only are they thinking differently about words, they're thinking differently about religion as well, aren't they?
Yeah. So let's take Mike here, and let's keep going with this example. I really like it. Let's say Mike has decided that Ellie is the most wise person on the planet. So he's going to start studying Ellie's texts, okay? So
He's getting his PhD in it.
yeah, he's getting his PhD, he thinks it'll change his life, right? So he starts studying Ellie's text, and he's going there. How is he going to start to understand what it is she's even saying? I mean, the first time he read it, he thought that was talking about alcohol. Way off base, right? But so what does he need to do in order to get into that mindset to actually start understanding it? If he were to try to understand Ellie's text, what is something that he would need to do in order to begin to understand what it is she's talking about?
Maybe spend some time with her, like the high school.
Okay, spending time with her. Watch TikTok. Yes, absolutely. It's required reading or viewing. Anybody else?
I feel like I would have to get into the mind of her, like how she thinks. Mm-hmm. I think I would have to get into the mindset of like, how does Ellie think about the world and like what's going on for her to come up with that and it not be about alcohol.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And not only Ellie's text, but maybe he would read other texts as well to try to see, okay,
Right.
what did this person over here think about what Ellie was saying? He would go through a whole litany of steps in order to try to understand and become fluent in all things Ellie. Same thing's true with the Bible. Like Tyler was saying, we've got a biblical text here that is much older, has a much wider gap than just Mike and Ellie, right? We are way further removed from the biblical authors than Mike is from Ellie. So what we need to do is we need to do the same sort of steps. We need to try to figure out, okay, let's try to get in the mind of the ancient Jew, and let's try to understand, read other contexts, read other things in order to try to understand what they're saying, and be able to put that together to try to form a coherent narrative to understand who Ellie is and why she's writing this. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do just kind of a simple thought experiment, okay? So if we're trying to get in the mind of the ancient Jew, the person who is reading this for the first time, Mike has said this in his Revelation study, and I love it. The Bible was written for us, but it was not written to us, okay? It was written to the ancient Jew. They were the first ones to receive it, so we have to try to get in the mind of the ancient Jew in order to understand what it is God was trying to communicate to them. So for just a moment, I want you to imagine that you are an ancient Jew, okay? We're going to give you the name Shlomo.
What is it?
Shlomo.
Shlomo.
Shlomo is the Hebrew version of Solomon.
Okay.
Okay, Shlomo. And for the ladies out there, you'll be Shlomina. So we got Shlomo and Shlomina, okay? And you are a slave in ancient Egypt right now, okay? Your life consists simply of waking up, finding enough food to survive, and making bricks. That's your entire existence. You wake up, find food, make bricks, go home, okay? There's no hope in your life right now, okay? But as you're doing this, you are looking for some sort of hope, right? You can't just make bricks and do only brick making. You have to find some hope. So in that, you're going to look at other religions and you're going to look at other stories in order to try to find that hope. What we're going to do is, in order to try to understand the biblical creation account, we're going to look at a couple other creation accounts and then try to compare them and see if we can find any differences, see if we can figure out what God is trying to communicate to the Israelites that's different from what they've already heard. So, first one we're going to do is we're going to start with the Egyptian creation account, because that is going to be where Shlomo is right now. Right?
So I would be a slave as Shlomo. I would be a slave to these people, and these are, like, we're talking pyramids, right? Okay.
Yeah, pyramids. Yep. So the creation account for the Egyptians is a lot different than the biblical creation account, but there's actually some similarities too. So first of all, in the beginning, there was only dark, emptiness, and chaotic waters. Okay, these waters were called noon.
Noon, like the time?
Ooh. Noon, like N-U-N. Okay? So you've got the chaotic waters, noon. Okay? Out of the chaotic waters, land appears. It's in the form of a pyramid. It's called the Ben-Ben. Okay? So you've got the Ben-Ben that appears as a pyramid, and at the same time, there's a deity called Atum. Okay? Atum basically wills himself into existence somehow and ends up becoming this great god.
And this is what the Egyptians believe?
Yes, that This guy just willed himself into existence, but it actually gets a little crazier than that. So Atum has all of masculinity and all of femininity all wrapped up into himself.
2 for 1.
Yeah, so basically what Atum decides to do is he's bored, so he decides to have relations with himself in order to create offspring. And when he creates offspring,
she's shutting the lights out on
yeah,
the story.
evidently this is not a good story.
She's like, I don't believe this. Time to go home.
So after let me put Atum up here. After Atum has relations with himself, he ends up having 2 kids, Shu and Tefnut. Okay?
Shu and Tefnut.
Shu and Tefnut. These are classic Egyptian names. Think about naming your kid that. So we got Shu and Tefnut, and they decide that there's this vast open space, and they want to go exploring the whole earth, right? They want to explore the chaotic noon, the chaotic waters, and so they go out and decide to explore. Atum gives them the blessing, and they go off. Well, after a while, Atum starts getting nervous, and as any good father would do, he rips out his eye and sends it out to go search for them.
So hold on.
Obviously.
So when I read Genesis 1, this is an account that the Jews believe, but they're slaves to the Egyptians, and that's what they believe?
Yes.
Okay, I'm with you.
It gets a little weird. So Atum basically rips out his eye, sends it after Shu and Tefnut, and is frantically looking for them. As you would be if you ripped out your own eye with that perception and everything, you have to grow another one, right? Obviously, you just create a new eye because the other one's out on holiday. So you go and create a new eye. So Atum creates a new eye and puts it back where the old one was. But then, unfortunately, the eye comes back with Shu and Tefnut, and now the eye is jealous. We all know how eyes be. So the eye is jealous, okay? And so what Atum decides to do is he's going to take that and he's going to put it on his forehead. So now he has 3 eyes. And once he has 3 eyes, he now becomes one of the most wise beings in the world because of this all-seeing third eye.
He's like my iPhone, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've got the all-seeing third eye, and what's kind of interesting is if you were to take out a dollar bill right now, look on the back of it, you'll see the pyramid, and you'll see the all-seeing eye at the top. That's this story. Okay? So
that's what the Egyptians believe as to how the world started.
yes.
Noon, Atum, Shu, eye.
Yeah. Tefnut.
That's
Don't-
very
don't forget
different.
Tefnut.
That's very different than what I'm reading here.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay? So after this all happens, they decide, you know what, it's kind of lonely with all these gods. So they start procreating and start having more god babies until eventually the entire world is filled and everything is created. So in order to create things, you've got to basically create a god over that thing. So if you're going to create the sky, you've got to create a god that is the sky god in Egyptian mythology. So if you're wanting a god of frogs, you got to create the frog god. So you've got all these gods now, okay? And they get into all of these weird scenarios, okay? You've got gods fighting each other. You've got gods having incest. You've got gods murdering each other. And all of this ends up creating humanity, okay? Atum seeing all this gets saddened by everything he sees. He cries. The tear falls onto the earth, and man is created from that tear. Just an accident. Tear falls out. Whoops, created man. I guess we'll enslave them and make them serve us, right?
Naturally.
Yeah, if it happens, you got to take advantage of the situation. So now you've got. I know this is really weird. Bear with me for a minute. It's going to make sense.
I'm in.
So you've got a tomb with all of humanity serving him and all these other gods, okay? Well, while you're creating more gods, some of these gods are jealous. Some of these gods don't like a tomb. You've probably heard of a lot of these names like Osiris and Apophis and all these other Egyptian gods. And so these Egyptian gods are fighting with the tomb constantly, trying to usurp the throne, trying to beat a tomb. It's like Game of Thrones on steroids. So there's all this infighting back and forth. And all of these fights tell us a little bit about how the world is. One example is Atum, who later would be called Re, or Ra, ends up going and getting attacked by this snake god that's chaos, okay? It's the Lord of Chaos, okay? This snake attacks Re, and Re flees across the sky until he reaches the end where the snake attacks him. They fight all night until Re finally beats the snake, or at least beats him back enough to escape. Then Re, the sun god, goes back and runs away from the snake again, and this happens every single day.
So in their thinking, that's day and night, right?
Yes. Yeah,
And
so
it's who's winning. Is it Ray winning or is it the snake, right?
Right. So, I mean, Ray is getting away, but is he really winning? He's got to fight this thing every single night.
Sounds like a hamster on a wheel.
Exactly. It's nonstop, continuous, and that's how all of these stories are. Constant usurping, and it's trying to figure out, okay, why are the seasons the way they are? Why is this happening to me? Why am I here? What is my purpose? And that's what all these stories are trying to explain.
So that's how the Egyptians think, right? And there's other people there other than just the Egyptians. Like we have the Jews and we have the Egyptians. There's the Canaanites, right? And the Babylonians. They have an alternate explanation, right? That's different than these guys, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm with you.
So we'll look at just one more. We'll look at the Babylonian account, okay? The Babylonian account starts with these chaotic waters. It's two gods, okay? You've got Apsu and Tiamat, okay? Let me just...
Apsu. Tiamat.
Sorry, my handwriting is awful. Okay, so you've got Apsu and Tiamat, and they are water. You've got fresh water and you got salt water, okay? And they're constantly swirling around each other, and it's just a chaotic mess, okay? Then they give birth to a couple gods, one of them being Ea, okay? Ea is the god of wisdom, okay? And Ea decides that he's not really a fan of Apsu, okay? Because Apsu is a cranky old man. So all these gods are basically running around creating all this noise, and Apsu can't sleep. So naturally, he decides to murder all of his children. I mean, some of you can probably relate to that. So he decides to murder all his children, and so Ea says, no, I'm not going to let you murder all my children. or all the children, so I'm going to kill you first. Kills him first, and so Ea becomes the supreme god. Okay? Well, now, these two are lovers.
Oh.
Okay? So now Tiamat is ticked. Okay? Tiamat decides that she is going to battle Ea and create all of these large sea monsters, all of these chaotic sea monsters, and she's going to basically stir up the sea to be this chaotic abyss that nobody can overcome.
This already sounds way different than what the Egyptians believed.
Yeah, it is very much different. So you've got Ea, who is now afraid of Tiamat and can't do anything about it because she's got all of these sea monsters guarding her. Okay? So Ea ends up going to his son. And Marduk is, sorry, I lost my spot there for a sec. Marduk is the guy's name. Okay? So Marduk ends up being the one that goes and decides that he's going to fight Tiamat, but the only way he can beat Tiamat is if he gets all the help from the other gods. They all team up, and they give him certain of their powers and mystical spells and stuff like that, and they all agree that if he beats Tiamat, he is now the ultimate god. Okay? So we've kind of got like a bargaining thing going on right here. Okay? So in the story, which is called the Enuma Elish, the Marduk attacks Tiamat, and it's this epic battle. Okay? In the Enuma Elish, you've got this long, it's probably, if you were to print it out, it's probably 15, 20 pages. Like seven of those pages is just this battle. It's this epic long battle, and Marduk is throwing storms and whirlwinds at the sea creatures to kind of get them all over the place. And at one point, Tiamat opens her mouth to try to eat Marduk, and Marduk shoots an arrow straight into her mouth, down into her heart, and kills her.
Great aim.
Yeah, great aim. Curve the bullet, which is
Yeah.
crazy. So after this, he ends up taking Tiamat, ripping her in half, putting one on below the earth, which becomes the sea, and then taking the other half and putting it up in the sky, which would become the rain.
Ah, of course.
So now you've got, okay, this is where the seas are, and this is where the rain is, okay? After this epic battle, this is how we get this. Later on, Marduk is happily ruling, and he ends up deciding to give the gods all these tasks because, things need to get done around the house. So he gives the gods these tasks, and the gods are not happy about it. They don't like doing the menial tasks. They don't like taking the trash out, constantly getting yelled at for it. So they complain enough to where Marduk decides that he's going to take a general in Tiamat's army, crush the general, squeeze the blood out until it drops on the ground for humans to grow in order to do all the meaningless chores that the gods don't want to do. And that's how you get humanity. So, all these weird stories about how these ancient cultures viewed the creation of the world, okay? And I know that was kind of an offshoot, and you're probably saying,
Yeah, that's weird.
yeah, we came here to learn about the Bible. We're not here trying to learn about Egyptian mythology. But it's going to make sense here in a minute, okay? So if you guys want to open your Bible to Genesis 1:1.
So we're actually going to start reading
We're
now.
going to start reading, yeah. All of that, a long introduction just to get to Genesis.
Well, no, I think that's important, though. Like, I need to know what these people are thinking before I read what this story says. Because I hear all these other stories. If I'm a Jew, if I'm Shlomo, right?
Shlomo, yeah.
Shlomo,
Or
sorry.
Shlomina.
Shlomina, yeah. If I'm Shlomo or Shlomina, I need to know what the other people are saying before I come to this story, I need to hear what Mike's saying about the simping to hear Ellie, to understand what's different about them, right?
Right.
Okay.
So imagine, go back to Shlomo, right? Imagine you're Shlomo and Moses comes to you and tells you about this brand new God. It's a God unlike any of the other gods. And he asks you to worship him. Your first question is, okay, who is this God? Why should I worship him? What's his whole deal? How did he come onto the scene? All these gods have an origin story. So that's what Genesis 1:1 is. It's God's origin story. How everything came into being and why God is in the position he's in. Okay? So, Tyler, I'm going to have you start reading in Genesis 1:1. And
Gotcha.
you're just going to keep going until we hit something that's different than the other two accounts that we just read.
Okay, sounds good. So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Yeah, that's good. Right off the bat, okay, this story is radically different, okay? All of these other stories, you've got this chaotic waters and this abyss that needs to be conquered, that needs to be tamed, okay? And everyone's afraid to tame it, and it's this epic struggle that it's hard to overcome. Right here in the beginning, it says God created everything.
Yeah, it says in the beginning, he created the heavens and the earth.
Yeah, so heavens and the earth in Hebrew is actually a way of saying everything. Oh. It's like saying, like in Revelations, you got the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Oh. It's like saying everything in between, okay? So the heavens and the earth, God creates all of it.
And they're not telling me here a story about some epic, like I've got to chase this snake around this thing.
Yeah.
I don't get to win some weird battle. Yeah. It's just God, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It stands out, doesn't it? We read these two.
It's different.
Right. We read these two stories, and you've got all of this epic battles. You've got uncertainty, who's going to be who, and all of a sudden, God just creates everything. Yeah. Kind of crazy. Do you want to start reading? Start reading it too.
Again? In verse 2?
Yeah.
You're going to tell me to stop when there's another theologian? Okay.
I'm going to tell you to stop.
Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep.
Yeah, let's go ahead and stop there.
Oh.
Darkness over the abyss. My translation says over the watery deep, or the chaotic abyss. Does anybody else have anything different in their translations? Just watery abyss? Is that what yours says?
No, mine's the NIV, and mine says, now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep.
Surface of the deep. So, in Hebrew, this is the exact same thing that we're looking at here. Okay? Now, some people are going to go, wait. Those stories were crazy. This is the Bible. The Bible's not crazy. I agree with you, okay? So we have to figure out, why is God using this in order to communicate his creation story, okay? So let's read on. If you want to go to, actually, I'll keep reading here. So now the earth was without shape and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the watery deep. But the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the water. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, so God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness night. There was evening and morning the first day. So, right off the bat, no epic struggle, no big battle, no tension to see who's actually going to win, who's actually going to be able to rise out on top. There's no uncertainty. Right off the bat, it says God created everything. And then this scary water, this scary chaotic abyss, is nothing to God. It says the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. It's like a dove. Just
like, I own all this.
Yeah, like completely unfazed by this chaotic waters. In fact, in the first part it says, let's see, now the earth was without shape and empty, and darkness was over the face of the watery deep. But later on, it just calls it the water. As if once God hovers over the water, it then becomes peaceful.
So it's no longer chaotic. It's just like, oh, that's a really calm water. Like, that's good for me.
Yeah.
That doesn't hurt me.
So remember, in this account, it took 7 pages and an epic battle in order for Marduk to defeat Tiamat. We've now got it in 2 sentences with God.
Yeah, that's very different.
If you're an ancient reader, this sticks out like a sore thumb, okay? You're immediately blown away, and you're immediately going, who is this God? That doesn't make any sense to me. That's not how this typically works.
I'd be like, I need to know his name.
Exactly. So then you go on, okay? And on day 2, he separates the waters from the waters, just like you had here where Marduk ripped apart Tiamat and put half of the waters above and half of the waters below. This wasn't some gruesome thing God did. This isn't a God that the God of the Bible ends up defeating. He's separating the waters just because that's what he wants to do. Not epic, not anything crazy.
Yeah, and it's crazy. Doesn't it just say he just called or he spoke?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like he's battling anything.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's like there's almost no effort behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm speaking right now, and it's not a whole lot of effort.
Exactly. Just simply speaking things into existence is something that it's not a magical spell. He just says, I want this done, and it's done. Okay? Day 3, you get the dry land appears, and you get the vegetation. Day 4, you get the sun, moon, and stars put up into the heavens. Okay? Remember here, Atum is the sun god. Okay? He's the one that is so wise and creates everything and starts everything off in the Egyptian account. It's like God's like, oh yeah, on day 4, let's throw the sun into the mix too. We're going to need a sun. It's not something to be worshipped. It's not something that is scary or has any power or is a threat to him.
So it's almost like, yeah, that guy that you're believing, I'm over that guy too.
Right.
The Atum guy that you subscribe to, yeah, I made him too.
Yeah, just nothing. Then you get day 4, which this is really cool. Day 4, you get the fish that are put into the waters, okay, and the birds in the air, and then you get this weird caveat. Like, seems like it's just odd that it's just thrown in there. Okay, in verse 20, God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky." God created the sea creatures and every living and moving thing with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds. So, in verse 21, it says God created the great sea creatures. Does anybody have anything else different in their translation?
Verse 21.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I have great creatures.
Great creatures. Anybody else have anything else? So some translations will say sea monsters. Some will say sea serpents.
So you're talking like the NLT or like the New King James or
Yeah.
the King James Version? Okay.
Yeah. So this is actually the word Tananim in Hebrew. And Tananim is vicious sea monster. Okay? It's like what Tiamat created in order to fend off all these gods. And all these gods were too afraid to attack Tiamat. Okay?
Oh, so what you're saying to me is the word great creature in my Bible in verse 21, if you look at the Hebrew there, it's, how would you say that word?
Like sea monster.
It's sea monster, but it's a little weird if we put sea monster in as a translation
Right,
into the
right.
Bible, because like that seems like what's going on here. But that's really what that is. And so what they're saying, or the author's saying, is that God was over that thing too?
Yeah.
That thing that the Egyptians and the Babylonians were prescribing to? Like,
Yeah, it's like it's an afterthought. Again, this thing that was that scared all these gods is something that God is just throwing into the mix just because he wants to create these things. Okay? Let's see, where are we? Day 6, you've got God creating all the living creatures on the land, which ends up including humanity. Now remember, in these two accounts, humanity was an afterthought. It was something that was just an accident in order for humanity to become servants for these guys.
as a teardrop, right?
Yeah, one of them was a teardrop, one of them was like, I need some slaves, so let's squeeze out blood from this other god. And
Yeah, that's an afterthought.
yeah, just complete afterthought, just something for expedience for the gods, okay? In Genesis, we get a different story. All of these others are like 2 or 3 sentences, okay? Describing all these days of things being created. The rest of chapter 1 is about creating humanity. More than half of chapter 1 is talking about the creation of man. It's the pinnacle of all creation. Everything in Genesis 1 is pointing to the creation of man. Once man is created, God can rest and enter into creation. He isn't creation like these gods. He isn't the sun or the sea or anything like that. He is completely separate and apart from creation. So let's go back.
So hold on, if you're saying that right, I'm slow. I'm a slow learner. So God is saying in this story, hey, I made you. All this stuff I was doing beforehand was for you. Like rule and subdue it and like be Lord over it, or like have command over it. But in these other stories, they're saying like, oh, yeah, you just kind of fill out the tears or blood, and like I just needed someone to like do my
Right.
dirty work.
Right. Then, not only do you get half of chapter 1, but then God spends an entire other chapter in chapter 2 to dive deeper in and explain more about what this creation of man was like. In all these other accounts, it's an afterthought, something that just accidentally happens. But in Genesis 2, you get this really cool image where in Genesis 1, you've got God just speaking, and there it was, speaking, and there it was, speaking, and there it was, okay? In Genesis 2, you've got God gets his hands dirty in creation, and he forms man with his own two hands. You've got this idea of God basically taking a lump of clay and molding it precisely into exactly what he wants it to be. Then he takes the lump of clay and he breathes his life-giving spirit, his ruach, into the man to give him life. This isn't an afterthought. This is something that God treasures and loves deeply. And it's all over this. So,
See, this is, I mean, I'm just following what you're saying. And I'm trying to think ahead. Like, this is very different than how I usually read this. Like, now as a 21st thinker, like a 21st century thinker, like I grew up in like science class, things like that, I'm coming to this and saying, in the beginning, now let's talk about science about that. But what was going on in the world at that time, they're not thinking about science. They're thinking about these guys, right? They're thinking about Nun and Apsu, Tiamat, Ea. And this story is basically saying, like, hey, I'm way different than that. I'm way different than that story. In fact, I'm Lord over that story. It's not really about, like, how many days, how many this, how many that. That might be in there. That might act because God is also the God of science, right? Am I onto something here?
yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, just like if you were to read a biography of Albert Einstein, you would get to know his life and stuff, and there would be science in it, but that's not the point of the book. If you wanted to know about E equals MC squared, you'd go read a science book, right? So we need to look at this and say, this isn't a science book, but there is science in it. I know a guy, actually, who wrote a book about the science behind it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys know him, Mike Bradfield.
Yeah, I know him well.
Yeah.
That book is actually putting Christmas gifts under the tree for me.
Yeah,
So I'm kidding.
me
I'm
as
kidding.
well, me as well. So the science is there, okay? But we have to remember that that isn't the overall point.
That's just one thing. That's there, but there's also this theological point that was happening at their time. So that's interesting to me.
Right. Yeah, and why am I saying that? Because the ancient Jew didn't think anything about science, okay?
They're not thinking about quantum physics.
Right. They're still thinking the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. They're thinking that the earth is flat, stands still, and that's how the sun revolves. God doesn't come out and say, yes, that's how it is. You're not going to find that in the Bible, okay? You'll see metaphors and stuff to talk about the sun rising and falling, just like we do, the sun sets and stuff like that. But God's not interested in correcting the science. He doesn't go to Moses and say, hey, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Let me teach you quantum physics. That's not his point. That's not what he's trying to do. He's trying to teach them about who he is and what he wants with humanity. And that's what we're going to be spending the rest of, that's what we're going to be spending pretty much all throughout the Torah, is figuring out who God is and what he wants with humanity.
So these next 5 weeks then, well, what are we going to encounter?
So next week, we're going to dive even deeper into chapters 1 and 2. There's a ton of stuff here. You've got this snake in the garden. You've got these
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, you've got these two trees that God puts before man. Why are these two trees here? You've got this idea that God created man in his image. What does that mean?
Yeah.
You've got all these different concepts, and so we're going to dive deeper into those. Then the following week, we've got the fall, and it's the story of the serpent tempting Adam and Eve, and them sinning and being cast out of the garden.
Yeah, that's weird. Doesn't they say, like, one of the curses after that happens, they're like, hey, you'll now, like, crawl on your belly?
Yeah.
Like, for the rest of your life? Like, I don't know about you, but, like, don't snakes already crawl on their belly?
Exactly.
That's kind of, so they have wings beforehand?
Yeah, and evidently they talk too, so that's kind of
So
weird.
we'll talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Because I'm interested about that, because that's really weird to me.
Yeah.
So.
So we'll get into that. As we move forward, we're going to continue with the fall with Cain and Abel and this downward spiral that man takes after they sin and remove themselves from the presence of God. Then we'll get into the flood, talking about what is God doing there, what's the purpose behind it. This God who seems so awesome and mighty, yet so loving and kind that he wants to form us with love, is now flooding the earth. seems like it contradicts.
You know something? I was reading about this the other day. You know how they bring the animals on? How many?
Two by two?
Yeah, that's what we're told, but that's not what the text actually says. Isn't that funny?
Yeah. Some of them.
I was reading about that, and I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Some of them came on 2 by 2, but not all of them.
Yeah.
But I always thought they just came out in pairs.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that?
Yeah, definitely,
Okay.
definitely get into that. And then as we move forward, it's basically just diving deeper and deeper into this concept of who God is and what he actually wants with us. Because like you said before, we can't just enter in halfway through the movie and understand what the movie's about. Okay? You can get the gist. You can still understand the movie. You can even like the movie. Okay? Same thing with the Bible. If we hop in just at Jesus, if we hop in just at the New Testament, you can get everything you need, but you're not going to get the full story.
You're not going to get that opening scene.
The plot is all set up in the first few pages of the Bible, and that's what we're going to be spending the next 5 weeks and the next year on.
So in the sake of time, as we wrap up here, what's my main takeaway from today?
That when we read the Bible, we need to make sure we're approaching the Bible in a way that actually helps us understand what it's trying to say.
And we need to do that from the perspective of a first century Jew. So that's who the Bible is written to. It's written for us, but it wasn't written to us, right? And so we need to not only think about what they're thinking about here, but we need to think about how they tell stories. And we need to think about how they structure their characters and their themes so that we can dive in with their context and understand, that's what's going on here. That's why when I get to Genesis 10, I get a really long genealogy. That's why when I get to Genesis 5, it says, and then he died, and then he died, and then he died. All of that stuff, if we can think like them, will make more sense as we explore the storyline, right?
Exactly. Cool. Yep.
All right. Any questions about where we're headed or what we're doing?
I know that was crazy. If you don't want to ask questions now, we'll be cleaning up and doing some stuff, so we'll be here. So please come up and...
I'll just say this, I'm excited because this is a story that I think I've learned all these years of Sunday school, and I know the basics, like I know like the Noah's story and I know the Tower of Babel just like off the top of my head, but like to understand it on a deeper level and to understand what's actually happening there culturally and to actually understand like, hey, this is why they put that word in there, I think that's neat. I don't know, maybe I'm a nerd.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing real quick, shameless plug. Above here on the screens, you see thebibleacademy.net and at the Bible Academy. This is a social media accounts and a website Tyler and I set up in order to move deeper into this stuff, okay? We don't want the study to just be you come here on Sunday afternoon, you go, well, that was weird. They talked about a lot of nerdy stuff and then go home, okay? We want you to say, okay, let's dive into this on Sunday, and then what Tyler and I are going to do is we're going to be putting out a lot of material from where we learned this stuff.
If you want more. Basically, we didn't just come up with this off the top of our head. If you're interested in how characters are developed in the Bible, we'll send you that resource. Mm-hmm. If you're interested about these stories, we'll say, hey, here's more. So just a place for you to, again, it's all if you want.
Yeah, there'll be videos, there'll be podcasts. If you're someone that's like, I don't want to just sit there and read the Bible, I want to actually listen to a podcast while I'm driving to work or anything like that, we'll be posting podcasts and stuff like that as well. Not from us, but from people who are talking about this stuff. So.
Well, you want to pray? You want to pray and get us out of here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, cool.
Dear Lord, I thank you so much for this group. I thank you for the study. And I thank you for your amazing word. The fact that you can take a story that seems so simple, a story that just communicates how you created the world, and you can pack so much into it. God, it amazes me that we just scratched the surface. I'm so thankful for your word. I'm so thankful for everyone here that is excited and willing to do the work, to dive into the word, and to try to understand it more. I'm thankful for Tyler for being up here with me and diving into this content as well. And I pray that you be with us this week. I pray that as we go along, that we'll continue to focus on you and serve you, and that we see everybody again next week. In your awesome and perfect name I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, well, thank you guys once again for coming out, and hope to see you guys next week.
Thanks, guys.